Hey, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is Liz joining you as usual from Central Virginia and the unceded lands of the Monacan Nation, and I'm so glad that you are here with me. You may have noticed that new podcast episodes have been sporadic and unpredictable for the last year, and that's because I have been in the middle of a full-scale transformation, primarily triggered by the end of my nearly 2 decades-long marriage. I bet many of you know what this is like, and if you don't, you can imagine it. There's all the logistical and legal details of the end of a relationship, plus, in my case, moving to a new home, knowing myself and my place in the world without this partnership, understanding what it means to solo parent, and helping to guide my children through this transition. All the things. And just in case this all sounds like pure misery, it isn't. Because finding myself outside of my marriage has meant all kinds of doors opening, some of which have been so much fun and so exciting. It's really been a death and a rebirth all at the same time, which of course is the way of the feminine. And as transformations really can do if we let them, they tend to open up space for the bigger questions like, what am I doing here? Why am I making these choices? How is this transformation opening me up and serving my evolution? How's it changing how I view the world? If you've listened to the show before, or if you've read my book, Home to Her, Walking the Transformative Path of the Sacred Feminine, then you may know that my own path towards sacred feminine wisdom was kicked off by a pretty intense awakening experience that I had at a business conference. And the events that precipitated the end of my marriage happened in a very similar way. At some point, I will probably speak and write about this in more detail, but for now, it's enough to say that none of this has been an accident. And every big life step that has unfolded since that initial experience I had at the business conference has been guided by the hand of sacred feminine wisdom. I'm absolutely sure of it. But what does that mean? And how has my understanding of the sacred feminine evolved and changed? Well, this has showed up in 2 ways in particular that relate to my work and this podcast that I want to share with you, so you'll know where we're headed going forward. The first thing is this. When you really open yourself up to feminine wisdom and power, you are also opening yourself up to see all the ways that this wisdom and power has been exiled, suppressed, erased, minimized, or just completely excluded in all of the cultural systems and structures that are supposedly here to support us. And I do mean all of them. Workplaces, religions, government, academic institutions, entertainment, relationship norms and structures, even the places you turn to for personal development and growth like therapy. None of it was developed with the participation or input of women. None of it. So this obviously translates to the ways that this wisdom has been exiled within us too. And these are the kinds of revelations that truly crack us open because they demand accountability and change, often in ways that are really, really uncomfortable. It's really painful to look at how the structures we've invested a lot of time in, relationships, careers, religions, have omitted the feminine and female perspectives and therefore kept us as smaller versions of ourselves. Once we see it, it's really hard to unsee. And it's really hard to imagine our lives without these structures too. There's no roadmap towards more authentic living in alignment with feminine power and wisdom because there's no cultural incentive for that. All the systems crumble and fall if we really admit that everything we're participating in, everything, was created without the input or perspective of 50% of the population. So, if we want to live in alignment with true feminine wisdom and power, we are headed into the unknown. And I have had this experience again and again. First, when exiting my professional career, then acknowledging that the spiritual traditions that I was raised in and invested in didn't represent female wisdom. And most recently, how my marriage was constructed around a former version of me that no longer exists. This is soul-shaking stuff. And that's the reason why the visual representation of my work has changed. For many years, a butterfly has been the official symbol of my work. This was a conscious choice that I wrote about in my book and was based on specific experiences I had before and during a trip I took to Crete many years ago. The butterfly is a symbol known to be deeply connected to the sacred feminine in the ancient Minoan culture of Crete, and it resonated with me enough that I not only adopted it professionally, I tattooed it on my body, I made sure it was featured prominently as section dividers in my book, and at the time, I also felt like it accurately represented the process of personal and spiritual growth. We all know that butterflies are powerful symbols of transformation, in large part because of the dissolution process that they must go through within the chrysalis to emerge as something bright and beautiful. And within the metaphor lies a promise. If we're willing to undergo the messy process of transformation ourselves, we too will emerge on the other side more beautiful than ever before. There's just one big problem with this. When we seek to transform, we don't know what's going to happen. In reality, the process of transformation calls us into the wild unknown. Often we're being called to relinquish structures, jobs, relationships that stopped serving us a long time ago, but nonetheless have brought us tremendous comfort and stability. And walking away from this stuff is scary as hell. And I am speaking from firsthand experience here. In the last 11 years since I first discovered the tremendous power and wisdom of the feminine, I've been called to let go of so much. The consulting company I founded, which I referred to as my first baby without any sense of irony, a successful career, many personal and professional connections when I just couldn't find the words to explain what was happening to me, the state that I called home for 16 years, the house that I loved where I brought home my babies, and most recently my marriage and a partnership that lasted nearly 20 years. And I got to tell you, when you're in the thick of all this, there is no sense of a brighter, more beautiful existence just waiting for you on the other side. Most days you're just holding on to your sanity for dear life. It really calls for radical surrender and trust in the principle of emergence, which are both hallmarks of the ancient feminine wisdom I've been studying for more than a decade now. I'll get back to emergence in a second. But yet, like a moth to a flame, we keep going, irresistibly drawn to an outcome we can't even see yet. The butterfly dances in the light, which is great, but the moth invites us into the depths. She demands that we trust in ourselves and the process with no guarantee of what's awaiting us on the other side. And in my experience, this is the true process of accessing your most authentic power. You head straight towards what's calling you, even if it terrifies you, especially if it terrifies you. Will you survive? You don't know, but you go anyway. And maybe, just maybe, you find your way home to yourself. So a moth dancing with a flame is the new symbol of my work. And that energy is going to be represented here on the podcast. I want to talk to women who have allowed themselves to go down in flames. I want to amplify their voices because one of the most painful aspects of making these changes is feeling like we're doing it alone. And that's how we stay underfoot of the patriarchy, by buying into this bullshit idea that feminine wisdom and power doesn't exist. We're going to counter that here. So that's the first aspect of change that I want to call your attention to. And the second is this. I have spent over a decade researching, writing about, working with sacred feminine energy in a whole variety of ways. And in the beginning, my evolution was sparked by an intense recognition of her absence in every spiritual tradition I looked in. And that was really important to me because I'm a spiritual seeker. So I went looking for her in the sacred stories and mythologies and religious and spiritual traditions of the past and the present. And I absolutely found her. But in finding her, I also realized that this really doesn't have anything to do with religious beliefs or dogma. And it doesn't even have to do with spirituality if that doesn't resonate for you. It resonates for me, so that's a big part of it for me. What I'm really talking about here is power, and specifically a whole different way to view and understand power that is anchored in the fully embodied feminine. Anything that we label sacred is imbued with a lot of power, which is why these sacred stories hold so much weight for us as women. And the absence of the feminine in our most predominant religious traditions here in my country is absolutely correlated to the lack of feminine attributes, experiences, and female identified bodies that we get to see in so many areas of life. And so, if we want to access authentic wisdom with roots in the feminine, and if we want to source feminine power within ourselves, but we don't really know what that looks like or what that means, the historical record, especially those pre-patriarchal nuggets that we've got, and these sacred stories that have retained some of their indigenous wisdom throughout the years, well, that's the best place to find a map for ourselves. To support my own evolution over the last year and a half, I have looked back to my research to look for specific aspects of power in the evidence and stories. And there's 6 facets of power that I really want to focus on. So you see this evidenced in my work, in my social media, and here on this podcast. And I'll just give you a quick overview of them here. 1 is the power to affirm and celebrate life. In comparison, because maybe this seems obvious, but look at what constitutes power in our current culture. It is the ability to dominate, to exercise control over other people, to amass and control wealth and resources. And at the national level, it's the ability to dole out death in the form of wars and state-sanctioned violence. This is completely counter to the evidence in my experience of the sacred feminine, which orients us towards power that protects, preserves, and sustains life. 2nd is embodied power. Right now, we recognize and prioritize mental acuity, as evidenced by our cultural obsession with logic and data and rational thought. This leaves no space for embodied knowing, intuitive power, the kind of power that electrifies the body and affirms that we know things at a bone-deep level. When we dismiss this kind of power or pretend that it doesn't exist, we are leaving ourselves at a significant disadvantage. And if you know how to access this kind of power, you are operating at a completely different level. This is real feminine wisdom, and yes, you have access to it. You just need to give it time and attention to find it and gain confidence in working with it. 3rd is the power of genuine emotion. And I know we are told over and over again that displays of emotion are signs of weakness. As women, we are told over and over again that our anger, our grief, our expression of feelings is too much. And we have all bought into this lie that women are more emotional than men, as if every war in history hasn't been started by angry, fearful, vengeful men. The sacred feminine, on the other hand, doesn't leave any human experience out. She knows that anger is an expression of boundaries needing to be set, that grief needs to be processed in order for new growth and experiences to appear, and that every emotion is just flowing through like water. Trying to bottle it up or limit it actually blocks and limits our power, or makes it show up in harmful ways. The 4th aspect of power is rooted power. If you've listened to this podcast or are familiar with my work in other areas, you'll know that I talk a lot about our relationship with the natural world. We see the sacred feminine represented as Mother Earth in traditions all over the world, and learning how to connect with her energetically in that way, starting from a place of deep gratitude and respect, it's an incredible skill that opens up a whole different avenue of connected power for us that just isn't available when you think of her as a resource to be extracted from. The 5th is collaborative power. Power with versus power over. And this is another aspect of power that we miss entirely in our hyper-individualistic world. And yeah, I'm talking about power with fellow human beings so we can build sustainable futures for all of us. But I'm also talking about the collaborative power of working with ancestors, animal guides, unseen realms that are considered unreal by our current cultural paradigm. It's like thinking about power in a really linear, simplistic fashion versus a completely holistic way. So many things open up for us when we do this. And then finally, the 6th is the power of emergence. And I referenced that term already. But this really ties into all the aspects of power that I've listed here. Emergence means accepting that we can only see so much. It means trusting the unfolding of the journey step by step by making choices that affirm our own lives in really small and big ways, by relying on our embodied intuitive wisdom to find just the next step on our paths, by allowing our emotions to flow through us and show us what needs to happen next, by rooting into the earth and all our relationships across this vast ecosystem we're a part of, so that we know we're not working alone. And in doing so, we trust the unfolding bit by bit. So exploring these aspects of power is the primary focus of my work these days. Helping women and those men who are ready for it to access and develop these centers of power in their own lives through the one-on-one coaching work that I do. If you have any interest in learning more, reach out to me on my website or social media. But these are the kinds of themes you're going to see explored on this podcast too. So some of my guests may bring this forward through the specific lens of the sacred feminine, and some might not. But we're always going to be focused on the practical application of feminine wisdom and power, because I truly believe this is the key to our personal liberation and the transformation of our entire human relationship with each other and the earth. I so appreciate you being on this journey with me. There's much more to come, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, here's your ongoing evolution and mine. May we all find our way home to her and home to ourselves.